Hello, everyone, and welcome to CASA Choices. Tonight we will be hearing from Keith Gargiulo, who is an engineer and vice president at PTC. To tell you a little bit about Keith, he is 52 years old and lives in central Illinois with his family. He has lived in 6 other states and has traveled all over the world. He's always enjoyed figuring out how things work, and it bothers him when things are broken, so he tries to fix them. Usually that works, but sometimes it explodes. He went to college twice to learn mechanical engineering and has worked on designing and building stuff like rockets, tractors, and even toys as his job for more than 20 years. So I think we're going to have a very interesting presentation tonight. Before I turn it over to Keith, I do want to remind you that if you have any questions during his presentation, you can put those in the Q&A box or in the chat. We will leave some time at the end to answer any questions that you might have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Keith.
Thank you, Kyle. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's having a great evening, and I look forward to talking with you here tonight. If anyone has questions, we'll be able to see them, and you can ask them at any time. So I do want to talk a little bit about how great engineering is. If you're wondering what it means, how can I be one? What does an engineer do? We're going to talk about all those things. But engineering really is a superpower. It's as close as you can get to being a Marvel superhero on Earth in real life. And there's a lot of things that are just wonderful experiences you can have, and you can take it and really go change the world. And that's not an overstatement. It may seem crazy to say something like that, just me sitting here at my house watching this video. What do you mean I can go change the world? But that's absolutely true. And I want you all to think about that as something that hopefully would be really interesting for you. So we're going to get started. I'm going to play a little video, because one of the things engineers do is when they find something that works, they reuse it. And I found a great video online that talked a lot about what is an engineer. So we're going to watch that for about 4 minutes, let that play, and then we'll talk about what the person said.
How do we get around from place to place without having to walk everywhere? How can we communicate with people who live far away? These were problems that people struggled with for a long time, until recently, before there were things like cars and phones and computers. And you know who solved those problems? Engineers. But do you know what an engineer is? The short answer is that an engineer is someone who wants to know how and why things work. Now, I want to know how and why things work, but does that make me an engineer? Not quite. Besides being naturally curious, an engineer is a person who designs and builds things, like machines or systems or structures that help solve a specific problem. There's more than just one type of engineer, too. But no matter what type of engineer someone is, they have to ask themselves 3 very important questions when they're working. Number 1, what is the problem that needs to be solved? And number 2, who has the problem that needs to be solved? And most importantly, number 3, why is this problem important to solve? Let's take a look at some examples. A really famous example of engineering is the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, California. I mentioned that there are different kinds of engineers, and a civil engineer is someone who designs and constructs buildings, roads, and bridges. For the person who designed the Golden Gate Bridge, what was the problem that they needed to solve? People couldn't travel in or out of San Francisco, which is surrounded on most sides by water, without a boat. Who had the problem? Residents of San Francisco mostly, but really anybody traveling in the area. And why was the problem important to solve? Well, you didn't want a whole bunch of San Francisco residents trapped in San Francisco forever, even if it is a super cool city. Plus, you wanted people outside of San Francisco to be able to travel to the city easily if they needed to. So the Golden Gate Bridge was engineered as a solution to this problem. In addition to civil engineers, there are also mechanical, electrical, chemical, computer, nuclear, and software engineers, and the list goes on. Let's talk about what some of the other types of engineers do. First up, electrical engineers. Electrical engineers study electricity. They design electrical systems like circuits and computer chips. Think of an electrical object that you use pretty regularly. How about your microwave? What problem was the microwave a solution to? Cold food, right? You have an electrical engineer to thank for the ability to reheat that leftover pizza you just had for lunch. But while you might not have heard of Joseph Strauss or Percy Spencer, the engineers responsible for the Golden Gate Bridge and the microwave respectively, you've probably heard of Henry Ford. As in Ford cars? Henry Ford was a mechanical engineer, or someone working in the manufacturing industry, making mechanical things like tools, engines, and machines. Machines like cars. Ford didn't invent the automobile, but his Ford Motor Company made a lot of them. His Model T car was famous for being affordable for plenty of Americans. Ford saw that lots of people who wanted to drive cars just couldn't, because they couldn't afford the pricey vehicles that were for sale. So he engineered a cheaper model as a solution to this problem. His fellow engineers started to do the same, and now, well, cars are everywhere. Henry Ford's not the only big-name engineer. A famous engineer around today is Marissa Mayer. Mayer is the president of the internet company Yahoo, and is also a software engineer. Software engineers work on computers and other products that use software to write programs to make them faster and able to do more things. No matter what kind of engineer someone is, their job at its most basic level is problem solving. Each engineer just specializes in solving certain kinds of problems. While it might seem like there are too many types of engineers to keep track of, just wait 15 years, or 50, or 100, because we'll probably have a ton of different types to add to the list by then. Think about it. Over 100 years ago, we didn't have jobs in fields like aerospace engineering, where people design and construct planes and spacecraft. We didn't have planes like we do today, or need spaceships, so we didn't need people to engineer them. Who knows what machines or tools or everyday objects we'll have in the year 3015. Personally, I'm hoping for underwater cities. But whatever these things are, we'll need engineers to make them. So what do you say? Who wants to be an engineer?
All right, so there's a few things that I really want to talk about that were in that video, which are pretty important. One of them is how many different kinds of engineering there are. And it's not important that you remember everything she said and talked about, but it's probably useful to think about the fact that anything you want to fix, anything you'd like to make better, any problem you think you see in the world, there's a kind of engineering you can do to fix it. And you can try to fix it even before you become an engineer. Any kind of experiment, anything you try to make something better, you're being an engineer. And that's a great thing to get started with. It's a great kind of attitude to have at any age. Really doesn't matter how early you start, and it really doesn't matter if you've gone to school for it or not yet. Doesn't matter. Also, she made a point about how fast things are changing. And that's really important, particularly because of things like technology and the way different kinds of technology are getting better all the time, and the way we can use technology to do different stuff. Not only are the kinds of engineering changing, but the things that happen in the products and the stuff we can buy and use in our lives are changing, and there'll be new things faster than ever before. And engineers are the people who need to come up with those ideas and make those things and be able to build them and keep them working when they break. So there's all sorts of different ways to be an engineer. If you want to come up with an amusement park ride, if you want to come up with a toy, if you want to come up with a ship or an airplane or a boat or a building or a computer program, those are all different things that engineers do and build and create, and sometimes just change. A lot of times they do that with just a little bit of new stuff and a lot of stuff that someone's figured out before them. So it really isn't that complicated, where every single thing that someone does is brand new from the start. You use a lot, like I used that video from someone else, you'd use a lot of things that people have done before you. Oops, I clicked the right thing. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about what it means to be an engineer, who can do it, what does an engineer look like. And the bottom line on this is an engineer looks like you. An engineer looks like every single one of us. Every single person at some point in their life is behaving like an engineer. Now, whether you decide to go do it for your job and your career and make a life out of it, that's different. The attitude, the ability to be it, that's true for everybody. And you can decide if it's the kind of thing that makes you excited and really want to get up and do that sort of work every day. You've got time. You know, at the age that everyone is who joins in these calls, you've got time to decide if you're someone who likes to build stuff, if you like to figure out new things, if you love to explore, if you're really curious about how stuff works, no matter what kind of stuff it is, even if it's biology or science or animals, Now, that's not necessarily engineering, but it certainly is in different science fields that are kind of close to engineering. And you can figure out that you like those sorts of things and go into a different career with a different person who would talk to you on a different CASA time about science. But if you're curious and you're always trying to figure stuff out, that probably means that you might want to think about engineering as you get older. And then, one of the things that is important is you've already got all the things you need. And this is actually true. Even if you've got a disability, it doesn't really matter. Just because it says hands, if your hands don't work as well as someone else's, that's okay. Everything that all of us are equipped with are things we can use to do the work of being an engineer. You can use things that other people have built to help figure out new problems that people haven't figured out yet. You can come up with your own ways to solve new problems. You can travel around the world and see all sorts of amazing and wonderful things. In my job, I've been lucky enough to climb up rocket launch towers, like when you watch a rocket go to space, those kinds of launch towers. I've been to places where they build toys. I've been to all sorts of different kinds of industries and businesses all around the world to help them and talk about the kinds of things they're building and the problems they're solving. Sometimes that's in a factory. Sometimes that's out where people are actually using the stuff they made and maybe it broke and they need to figure out how to fix it better. Sometimes it's back where they designed it in the first place. And all of those things are things engineers can go do. And all those things are things you can go do. I haven't seen any questions yet, so I'm going to keep going. One of the things that we have that happens in the world is spends a lot of time learning about sports heroes, about folks in entertainment, singers and actors, and folks that get a lot of popularity. That list doesn't always include engineers, but that's actually starting to change. And I put a few, maybe not the middle person, because that's me in that picture, and I'm sure you don't know me yet, but the person I'm with, you also probably don't know, even though that's a person who's inventing a way to grow replacement organs for you. That's a person who's invented how to make clean hospital grade water out of virtually anything. That's a person who, if you ever go to a restaurant or a movie theater and you see one of those red Coke machines where you can push the buttons on the screen and you can get whatever kind of Coke you want, he and his company actually designed and built that machine for Coke. So engineers do a lot of things that are part of your life every day, even though they aren't necessarily all as famous. The person on the left, you probably do know. He tends to be in media quite a bit, and Elon Musk. Now, the interesting thing is Elon Musk actually didn't get a degree in engineering, but he does engineering all the time. So this is what I said before. It doesn't really matter if you went to school for it. You can have the attitude and behave like an engineer, and he's a perfect example of it. On the other side of the screen, I don't know how many of you have ever seen the TV show Lego Masters. It's been on in the US for 2 seasons. I happen to know the person on the left in that picture. His name is Paris, and he was a friend of mine when I was in college, and he was on season 2. So if any of you have the ability to see a TV show called Lego Masters and watch it, you can watch the beginning of that series of season 2. And that's my friend Paris who was on there. And the interesting story is, because I'm an engineer and because they knew me, he had a partner who had to drop out of the show before they filmed it. And one day I got a phone call and they asked me, "What are you doing for 7 weeks in March? Because we'd kind of like you to see if you can be on the show because Paris needs a new partner." So for one day, I was actually going to be on the show, but then they found him a new partner, and that's the guy who's in the picture with him. So I didn't end up being on the TV show, but I had a chance because I was an engineer. So all sorts of things are changing about the way that engineers are seen in the world and how popular they are. And there's a lot of things you can do to start to learn how popular and exciting engineering can really be. That's the thing I want to talk about next. So if you're on this show, you're a kid and you're trying to wonder how, great, I'm a kid. What can I do? How is it that I can go get started in this, all this stuff called engineering? And there's really 3 things that I want to suggest. It's most important to do what you love. There are things that make you happy. There are things that make you excited. There are things you're naturally interested in. They may not be engineering, and that's okay. But if the things you like and love and are really interested in that make you excited sound like some of the things I've talked about today, that's probably an indication that you should maybe think about this some more and just do more of it. If that involves reading a book about some kind of science or engineering, or how to build a bridge. All of that's great, and you should do more and more of it. And you can do all of it now with books from schools and libraries and everyone that you're with in your daily life. If you are meeting people who think like you do, kids in your class, other family members, people who talk about the sorts of things that you like to talk about, spend more time with them. If you are online and you're watching videos, you can choose to watch a person who's talking about a video game, or you can try to do some things and use that time to look at people like Mark Rober, who is a fantastic YouTuber that I would recommend if you think about engineering, and just watch some of the stuff that guy builds and how he builds it from nothing up into really complicated things, sometimes really simple things, frequently things that explode, almost always very funny things. So if you want to go watch someone who can, and if you see those things that Mark Rober is doing and they look interesting and fun to you, that probably means you can start to do some of those things. You can find ideas online, things that are actually not super complicated to do, that are pretty easy to do with things you might just have lying around, and you can really get started playing and using your hands and your brain to think about stuff like that. And the last one is something that a lot of schools in this area around Peoria have access to. It's called First Robotics. The guy in the middle of the previous picture that I was in a picture with also started First Robotics. It is a worldwide thing. There are kids in class, in teams all over the world, who actually learn to build robots, program robots, and a lot of other things around engineering, all at all ages, from everyone who's on this CASA time all the way up through high school. Through the time when you're 18 years old, you can be doing different kinds of competitions. There are teams that are based in schools. There are teams that are based in libraries. There are teams for kids that are homeschooled. All sorts of teams for all ages are around this area. If you are listening to this call and you have access to the internet, you can go to First Illinois Robotics. You can search for it. You will find tons of information, and you can use that to find a team that's close to you. The teams are always looking for kids to be interested. Teams are actually always looking for mentor help too. If there are any adults who listen to this now or on the recording, those are things that are wonderful experiences and are really, really good and exciting for kids. It's like being at the Super Bowl when you go to a competition. It's that exciting. It's really that much fun. I see there's a Q&A question. I said, who did I say to watch on YouTube? The person's name is Mark Rober. I believe it's spelled R-O-B-E-R. He's a ex worked at NASA. So NASA that builds rockets and launches them into space. I believe he used to work there, and now he's doing, I think, YouTube full time, just talking about engineering and how to build things. And he's super interesting and fun to watch, not boring in any way. That was everything I had that I wanted to talk about. I don't see any other Q&A. I don't know if there's anyone listening who has any questions they want to type in or ask live, but I'm happy for it if there are any. If not, we can, Kyle, we can probably go back to you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Keith. That was really, really informative and really, I don't know, kind of inspiring for, I think for especially kids that think they might be interested in that career field or just like tinkering with things, just to see the options that they have. So I'm gonna give everyone a few minutes to type some questions in. I did have a couple questions that I came up with myself that maybe we can talk about while other people are typing their questions.
Sure.
So Keith, you did talk a little bit about schooling, and I know you said, it's not essential that you get an engineering degree to become an engineer, but it seems like that might be one path. So I'm wondering if you could talk about some of the types of engineering degrees, and then
Sure.
if possibly for kids that are getting close to college age, what are some good schools in Illinois that have good engineering programs?
Sure. So the basic approach to engineering is after you finish high school, you get a 4-year degree, a bachelor's degree, and you're now an engineer. You can go apply for a job as an engineer. You can start to work. There are certain things that you can also do in addition to that first 4-year degree. You can go get a master's degree, which is what I did. And that is, it varies. It's about another 2 years. In a master's degree, you're doing usually some new kind of design. In a bachelor's degree, you're really just learning the basics of everything, and you cover a lot of ground. You will eventually specialize in the third and fourth years. And maybe in the second, third, and fourth years, you start to specialize in your bachelor's degree. In your master's degree, it's entirely specialized. And then you can also get a PhD, which can take a long time, depending on the project you work on. And you're always doing a new bit of contributing some new knowledge as part of getting a PhD. And you can design an airplane made out of carbon fiber if you want to, and show how that can be done. And that might be your PhD thesis. That's what the project is called. In addition to school, there's licensing. So some jobs in engineering, like the Golden Gate Bridge or designing parts of a nuclear power plant, require not just a degree, but that you took some extra proof that you really actually know what you're talking about. So just like a doctor has to have a license, or a lawyer has to have a license, or a cosmetologist has to have a license. Those are all professions that have to be licensed and deliver what they do to a certain level of professionalism and standards. Engineers have licensing too. I was professionally licensed when I used to live in New York State. I didn't continue my license anymore. I did work at a nuclear power plant for a while before I had my current job. And if anyone's ever listening who's ever heard of the plant in Japan that about 11 years ago, because of its huge tsunami, had a meltdown and a huge disaster called Fukushima. I actually worked at a plant in Vermont in the US that was the exact same design as that plant in Japan. So, we didn't have any risk of a tsunami happening in central Vermont, but we did have the same exact design. I've been everywhere you can go inside a nuclear power plant. And to do certain design in a plant, you have to be licensed, not just have gone to engineering school. I think I covered all of the questions about the education. Did I miss anything?
Yes. Well, I don't know if you can speak to any of the colleges
schools,
or universities, right, maybe in state that have good programs.
University of Illinois has a very solid engineering program. In the more regionally in the area, up to University of Chicago, most Missouri Science and Tech, most is the acronym they go by. Another good school that I've had a lot of experience with. I work with FIRST robotics teams, and I've had a lot of kids go out of high school and go to these schools and have gone on to very productive engineering schools. There's a lot of other engineering schools all around the country. I didn't grow up in Central Illinois. I moved here about 11 years ago. So I have a lot more time spent in other parts of the country in my life than I did here, even though I've been here for a while. Up and down the East Coast, up and down the West Coast, all around the Midwest, in the Southeast, you can find dozens of very good engineering schools. There are tons of resources online that will help you tune in to the kind of school that's best for you. Like, for example, say you really care about mining. You want to help mine minerals out of the ground. You want to dig for gold, whatever it happens to be. There's a school for mining engineering. And you might want to go to Virginia Tech, which is where my grad school was, in Virginia. If you want to go to a really good game design school about computer games, and you want to learn that kind of engineering, you might go to my undergraduate school, which is called Rensselaer in New York State, or any one of a number of others that have very good schools for that. It really depends on the kind of thing you think you're interested in, which is usually pretty hard to be sure about when you're 16, 17, 18. That's not unusual. You're not kind of late in figuring out what's going on with your life. If you think when you're 16, 17, or 18, you really have to have it all figured out. I didn't, for sure. I went to a school that covered a lot of different kinds of engineering. And once I was there, I started off aeronautical engineering. Then I realized, well, maybe that's not right for me. Then I did aeronautical and mechanical for a while. Then I said, well, that was dumb. That's way too much work. And then I just did mechanical to finish. And that was because I looked at what aeronautical engineers actually do for a job, and it didn't seem like the thing I wanted to spend my life doing. So I figured it out as I went, and that's normally what happens.
Great. Thank you so much for that answer. Well, I don't see any other questions in the Q&A box, which must just speak to how well you explained what an engineer does. I guess nobody has any more questions.
I hope that was it.
Well, Keith, thank you so much for spending time with us tonight, telling us a little bit more about what an engineer does and how to become one. And thanks to everyone out there who's watching, and anybody watching on our YouTube channel. Remember, you can find a recording of this presentation and all of our past CASA Choices presentations on our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search CASA of the 10th Judicial Circuit. Thanks again, Keith. Everyone, have a great night, and we'll see you next month.
Bye, everyone.